Accustomed to controlling everything, he turned the care for his mother into an emotionless routine. For him, solving problems always meant paying well and keeping everything under control, until a caregiver enters his life and sees what no one else noticed before. And the way she cares exposes an absence he never had the courage to face. If you like stories of love and romance, watch until the end and you won't regret it. Subscribe to this channel and leave your comment saying where you are listening to this beautiful story from. We continue. The house had always seemed too large for just 2 people. Even with staff moving through the wide hallways, with nurses on organized shifts, and with the silence broken only by closing doors and footsteps muffled by polished marble, Rafael Almeida Sampaio had the feeling that he lived in a mausoleum. It wasn't the imposing architecture of the mansion in Jardim Europa that caused this impression. It was the absence of true life within those walls, the feeling that everything functioned perfectly well, but nothing there actually pulsed. He himself had contributed to this emptiness. Rafael had built a silent empire in the financial market, becoming a reference among investors, multiplying fortunes while consolidating his own, and he had done everything with the same cold discipline he had learned since he was a boy. Emotions were uncontrollable variables, therefore dangerous. Vulnerability was synonymous with weakness. Affection was demonstrated through provisions, security, structure. He ensured that his mother, Helena, had the best doctors, the most advanced treatments, and a team trained to deal with the relentless advance of dementia, which, in the last 3 years, had transformed the haughty woman he had known into a fragile shadow of herself. But real presence that he did not know how to give, he never had. With her slowly disappearing into the mist of her own memory, Rafael felt a dull guilt that no million-dollar contract closing could silence. He paid well, very well. As if money could compensate for the fact that on most nights he barely went up to the 2nd floor to see her before going to sleep. The turnover of caregivers had become a problem. Helena rejected everyone with disconcerting stubbornness. She screamed, cried, refused to eat, and pulled her hair when frustrated. The medical reports called it psychomotor agitation, an expected symptom. Rafael signed the checks, authorized medication adjustments, and continued delegating the problem as he delegated everything else, until the agency manager suggested a different candidate. Marina dos Santos did not have the most extensive resume, nor the most robust training. She came from a periphery in the South Zone, had studied to be a nursing technician at a public school, and had worked for years in nursing homes before specializing in home care. What caught Rafael's attention during the brief interview in the living room was not her professional history. It was the firmness in her gaze. She did not show the nervous subservience he was used to seeing when people from humble backgrounds stepped into that environment. Nor did she exhibit compensatory arrogance. There was only a solid serenity, as if she knew exactly who she was and didn't need to justify herself to anyone. He explained objectively the challenges of the case, the occasional aggressiveness, the difficult nights, the emotional unpredictability. Marina listened without interrupting, and when he finished, she only asked if she could meet Donna Helena before giving an answer. The question surprised Rafael. None of the previous caregivers had asked for that. Everyone accepted based on the generous salary. She wanted to know the person. Helena's room was at the end of the hallway, spacious and bright, with windows facing the internal garden. The elderly woman was sitting in an armchair near the window, her vacant gaze fixed on some undefined point. Marina did not approach immediately. She stood observing the woman's posture, the way she breathed, the almost imperceptible tension in her shoulders. After a few seconds, she walked slowly until she was in Helena's field of vision, but without invading her personal space. She lowered herself slightly and said in a soft but firm voice, "Donna Helena, my name is Marina. I came here to meet you, if you allow me." There was no answer, but something changed. Helena blinked, trying to focus. Marina did not insist. She just stayed there, waiting. And then, in a gesture that surprised Rafael, she extended her hand, not to touch, but to offer. A choice, not an imposition. Helena looked at that hand for long seconds and then slowly placed her own hand over Marina's. It was a brief touch, but charged with something Rafael couldn't name. Acceptance, perhaps. Marina smiled and said, "It is a pleasure to meet you." Helena did not respond with words, but her eyes, for the first time that day, seemed to truly focus on someone, not with fear or confusion, with curiosity. Raphael felt something strange move inside his chest, relief because someone had achieved real contact with his mother, discomfort because that simple scene revealed how much he himself had failed. How many times did he simply walk in, give instructions and leave without really seeing the woman who was there? Marina accepted the job. She started the next day and established a routine that was both structured and flexible. She didn't treat Helena like an incapable child, nor like a patient to be managed. She treated her as a whole person whose preferences deserved attention. Small things began to change. The way Helena was dressed, respecting the dignity of someone who had once been vain. The choice of music in the room, not just neutral spa sounds, but old songs, boleros, waltzes that seemed to soothe some forgotten part of Helena's memory. Raphael began to notice these changes gradually. He didn't plan to observe Marina, but he found himself paying attention to the way she talked to his mother, even without a response, to the way she waited, without haste, when Helena refused to eat, to the patience with which she combed the white hair, turning it into a ritual of affection. There was technique there, of course, the fruit of experience, but there was also a humanity that couldn't be learned in any course. And that bothered Raphael in a way he didn't expect. That woman, coming from a world completely different from his, managed to give his mother something all his money had never bought: true presence. The weeks passed, and the house began to feel different, not in its physical structure, but in its atmosphere. Helena had fewer crises. She slept better. She even began to crack smiles, especially when Marina hummed softly while arranging the pillows. Raphael found himself going up to the second floor more often, making up excuses to check how things were, when in fact what he wanted was to understand that transformation. One afternoon, he arrived early and went straight to the room. The door was ajar and he stopped before entering. Marina was sitting next to Helena, showing old photographs from an album. His mother looked at the images with surprising attention, murmuring words Raphael couldn't hear. Marina listened, nodding, as if each confused fragment made perfect sense in the world. It was then that Helena said with sudden clarity, "You look like her." Marina seemed surprised. "Like whom, Donna Helena?" The elderly woman touched the photo with trembling fingers. "Like her. The girl in the blue dress." Marina looked at the image, and Raphael saw the change in her expression, something between recognition and unease. "Do you have good memories of this girl?" Helena closed her eyes and a tear rolled down. "She went away, everyone went away." Her voice was heavy with ancient sadness, and Marina just held that hand more firmly, without trying to correct her, without trying to bring the mother back to the present, just welcoming the pain emerging from a past that the disease had not managed to erase. Raphael felt something contract inside him. It wasn't just the scene itself, but the brutal contrast between that woman's delicacy and his own inability to touch his mother that way. He retreated silently, went down the stairs, went to his office, and closed the door. He sat in the leather armchair and stayed there motionless, feeling the weight of a guilt he didn't know how to name. That night, for the first time in years, Raphael had dinner in the kitchen instead of asking for food to be left in his office. Marina was there, preparing Helena's last meal. She was surprised to see him, but showed no discomfort. She just greeted him and continued what she was doing. Raphael poured himself some coffee just to have a reason to stay there. "How is she?" he asked, trying to sound casual. Marina didn't stop cutting the fruit. "She had a quiet day. We talked a lot." Raphael hesitated. "Does she say things that make sense?" Marina looked at him then, and he realized there was a sharp intelligence behind those calm eyes. "It depends on what you consider making sense. To her, it all does. They are her memories, her story. Even if they don't follow a chronological line, they are true." The answer disarmed him. He was used to medical reports that reduced Helena's speech to symptoms and delusions. Marina treated those words as legitimate narratives of an entire life. "Have you worked with many patients like this?" She nodded. "Yes. Each one is different. Donna Helena has a special sensitivity. She feels things very intensely, even when she can't express them clearly." Raphael drank the coffee slowly, observing how Marina moved through the kitchen. There was efficiency in her gestures, but also a care that went beyond what was necessary. She wasn't just doing a job, she was giving something of herself. "You are very dedicated," he said. Marina replied without looking at him. "I know what it's like to lose someone because I wasn't present when I should have been. I don't want that to happen to anyone else if I can help it." The sentence hung in the air, heavy with a weight Raphael felt but didn't fully understand. He wanted to ask more, but something in her tone made it clear that it wasn't open for exploration. "Thank you for what you are doing for her." Marina finally looked at him, and there was a second of connection, brief but intense, before she looked away. "You don't need to thank me. It's my job." But both knew it wasn't just that, and it was there in that large, silent kitchen that Raphael began to feel something he couldn't name yet. It wasn't just professional admiration. It wasn't just gratitude. It was an unease, a confused desire to be near, to understand, to touch that serene strength she emanated effortlessly. He didn't know yet that that woman hadn't arrived at his house by chance. He didn't know that, behind the competence, Marina carried questions she herself hadn't yet dared to ask out loud. Questions about the past, about old injustices, about a family name that might be linked to losses she could never repair. And Raphael didn't imagine that this nascent attraction would lead him to confront not only his own inability to love, but also the dark legacy upon which his entire life had been built. For now all he knew was that, for the first time in a long time, he felt like going up those stairs not to check protocols, but to see his mother's face through the eyes of another person. And that seemed like the beginning of something he still didn't know how to name. The days turned into weeks, and Raphael realized he was changing habits he had kept for years. He woke up earlier to have breakfast before leaving, precisely when Marina arrived. He returned home in the middle of the afternoon, claiming remote meetings, when in fact he wanted to cross paths with her in the hallways, observe how she cared for Helena, and hear her soft voice talking to his mother. He began to notice small details, the way she tied her hair when she went to bathe Helena, the way her hands moved with precision when measuring medication, but with tenderness when adjusting the blanket, the discreet smile that appeared when Helena said something funny, the fruit of her mental confusion. Marina treated those moments as gifts, not as symptoms. Raphael tried to convince himself it was just a legitimate interest in his mother's well-being. But the truth was, he was starting to wait for these encounters with an anxiety he hadn't felt since adolescence. And the most disturbing thing was that Marina did nothing to provoke this attention. She was professional, cordial, and kept the exact distance. She didn't flirt. She didn't seek approval. It was precisely this indifference that destabilized him. Raphael was used to being noticed. Women in his social circle gravitated toward him, attracted by the surname, by the bank account. Marina, on the contrary, treated him with the same respectful courtesy she used with the gardener. There was no reverence, and that made him want to win something she didn't even seem willing to offer: genuine attention. One morning he found her in the winter garden. Helena was sitting in a wheelchair, her eyes closed, her face turned toward the sun. Marina was crouched beside her, tending to the soil in a pot. She spoke softly, explaining what she was doing. "The root needs space, Donna Helena. When we feel cramped, we can't grow. Sometimes it's necessary to change the pot, to find a place where we fit entirely." Raphael realized that wasn't a conversation about plants. It was a delicate metaphor, perhaps for Marina's own life, perhaps for Helena's condition. He approached, and Marina turned. "Good morning, Dr. Raphael." He had asked her to call him just Raphael, but she insisted on the formal treatment, maintaining that barrier between them. "Is she well today?" Marina stood up, wiping the soil from her hands. "She is. She woke up asking to come here. I think the garden brings back good memories." Raphael looked around. That space had been created decades ago, when Helena was still young, newly married. His mother liked flowers, he knew that vaguely, but he had never paid real attention to the details. "Did she mention anything specific?" Marina hesitated before answering. "She spoke of a man, someone who came here with her. She said he brought plant saplings, that the two spent hours talking." Raphael frowned. "My father never liked plants." Marina stared at him with those calm eyes, and he felt she knew something he didn't. The important people in our lives aren't always the ones recorded in official documents. The sentence had a weight that went beyond casual observation. Raphael felt discomfort grow. Was it possible that his mother had had a relationship he was unaware of? Helena opened her eyes and looked directly at Raphael. For a second, she seemed to truly recognize him. "You've grown so much like him, but so different too." Raphael approached, kneeling. "Mother, I'm here. It's me, Raphael." Helena extended a trembling hand and touched her son's face, a rare gesture that left him paralyzed. "I know who you are. But do you know who you are?" The question hung there, enigmatic and painful. Before Raphael could answer, Helena closed her eyes and returned to that state of soft absence. Marina placed her hand delicately on Raphael's shoulder. "She has these moments. Don't force it. Let her come back when she's ready." Raphael stood up, feeling his legs weak. He looked at Marina and for the first time allowed her to see the vulnerability he hid from everyone. "I don't know how to take care of her. I never did." Marina didn't offer empty words of consolation. "There is still time to learn. As long as she is here, there is time." In the following days, Raphael began spending more time in Helena's room. Marina taught him small things without exaggerated didacticism, just by showing him. How to hold his mother's hand without squeezing too hard. How to speak in a tone that calmed, not infantilized. Raphael felt clumsy, inadequate, but Marina had a patience he didn't deserve. One night, it was almost midnight when he heard footsteps upstairs. He went up, worried. He found Marina in the hallway, coming from the room. She woke up startled. Sometimes it happens. Nightmares, maybe. I managed to calm her, but it took time. Raphael realized Marina had been there for over 12 hours. "Shouldn't you be at home?" She shrugged. "I wasn't going to leave her alone like that. The night caregiver only arrives in half an hour." Raphael felt gratitude, but also a dull anger at himself for needing someone from the outside to demonstrate that level of dedication. "Do you want some coffee or tea?" Marina hesitated but nodded. Tea would be good. They went down together, and Raphael prepared the drink with unusual attention. They sat at the table and for minutes only drank in silence. It was Raphael who broke the stillness. "You said once that you know what it's like to lose someone by not being present. May I ask what happened?" Marina fixed her eyes on the cup. She took a while to answer. "My grandmother. She raised me after my mother died in childbirth. I was all she had and she was all I had." Raphael waited without pressing. "When I was 22, I started a job that paid better, but it was far away. I left at dawn, came back at night. My grandmother was already getting sick, but I didn't realize the gravity. I thought I could compensate with money, pay for doctors, medicine, but I was absent. When she needed me most, I wasn't there." The pain in her voice was palpable. Raphael felt a tightness in his chest because he recognized that pattern. "How did she die?" Marina closed her eyes. "Alone. I was working. When I arrived, she was already gone. I will never forgive myself for that." Raphael extended his hand across the table and covered Marina's hand. She didn't pull away, but she didn't reciprocate either. She just let that gesture exist for a few seconds before gently withdrawing her hand. "That's why you do what you do. It's part of the reason. But there's another part too." Raphael waited. Marina looked at him directly. "My grandmother worked for a wealthy family. She spent years taking care of the house, of the children. When she got sick, they fired her without any assistance. She was left with nothing. No health plan, no decent pension, no recognition for decades of dedication." The contained anger in her voice was new. "What family was that?" Marina hesitated, and then said with dangerous calm, "The Sampaio family." The silence was dense. Raphael felt the floor move. "What?" She didn't look away. "My grandmother's name was Julia dos Santos. She worked for your grandparents for over 30 years. She was fired when she got sick without any gratitude." Raphael felt the blood pulsing in his ears. "Did you know that when you accepted the job here?" Marina nodded. "I did. But I didn't come for revenge. I came because I need the work, because I'm good at what I do, and because, in some strange way, Taking care of the mother of someone from the family that destroyed my grandmother seemed to be a form of reparation, or just irony of fate. Raphael stood up abruptly. He walked to the window, his back to Marina, trying to process it. His family had done that. His blood, his surname was stained by casual cruelty. And now, this woman's granddaughter was there, taking care of his mother with a delicacy they never deserved. Why are you telling me this now? Because you asked, and because I can no longer pretend this doesn't exist between us. Every time you thank me, every time you look at me that way, I remember that your family destroyed mine, and I don't know what to do with that. Raphael turned around. What way? Marina stood up, and for the first time he saw anger in her eyes, not explosive, but sad, tired. You know what way. You look at me as if I were special. But I am just the granddaughter of the maid your family threw away. There is no possible romance in that. Raphael took a step toward her. You think I don't know that? You think I don't know how impossible this is, but I can't stop thinking about you. I can't stop admiring everything you are. And it's not because you are exotic or different. It's because you show me every day how much I have failed as a human being. Marina backed away. That's not attraction, Raphael, that's guilt. You are confusing the two. He stopped, keeping his distance. Maybe it's both. Maybe it's guilt and desire and admiration and terror. But it's real. And you feel it too. Marina closed her eyes, and when she opened them, they were moist. Even if I felt it, what would it change? I work for you. I take care of your mother. Anything between us would be seen as opportunism on my part, weakness on yours. It doesn't matter what the truth is. What matters is what they will say. Raphael knew she was right. And if I didn't care what they say, Marina let out a bitter laugh, you wouldn't care. You are rich, white, powerful. You can survive any scandal. But me? I would be marked, and I can't afford to lose what I've built. She grabbed her bag and walked to the door. Raphael didn't try to stop her, but he said, I didn't know about your grandmother, but I'm going to find out the truth, and if it's as you said, I'm going to repair it somehow. Marina stopped without turning. Money doesn't repair some things, Raphael. Some wounds are too deep. She left, and Raphael was left alone in the kitchen, feeling the weight of a past he never chose, but that now defined him. For the first time in his life, he faced something he couldn't solve with competence or resources. He faced the raw truth that his comfort had been built upon the suffering of others. In the following weeks, Raphael delved into the family archives. He found old records, contracts, notes. He found Julia dos Santos's name on several pages, always described as dedicated, competent. And then he found the dismissal letter, cold, stating that her services were no longer needed due to an incompatible health condition. No compensation beyond the legal minimum. No thanks. Raphael felt nauseous. That was his family. That was the legacy he had inherited. And Marina had known it since the first day, but even so she had chosen to care for Helena with a tenderness they never deserved. When he arrived home the next day, he found a letter on the table. It was from Marina. Short, formal, polite. She was resigning. She thanked him for the opportunity, but explained she had found another position. 2 weeks' notice. Raphael crumpled the letter in his hand, feeling something break inside him. She was running away, not from him but from what could happen between them, and he didn't know if he had the right to stop her. Raphael went up the stairs 2 steps at a time, the crumpled letter in his hand, his heart beating hard against his ribs. He needed to see Helena, to understand if his mother knew anything, if in the confused depths of her memory there existed some recollection of Julia dos Santos, some fragment of truth buried under decades of family silence. Marina's revelation still echoed in his mind, transforming every step on that staircase into a confrontation with his own past. But when he opened the bedroom door, he found Helena in absolute panic. The substitute caregiver was trying to calm the elderly woman, who was crying convulsively, her hands clutching the sheets with desperate force, her whole body trembling. She won't stop. She's been like this since Marina left this morning. I can't calm her. I've tried everything. The frustration in the woman's voice was evident, mixed with a fatigue Raphael recognized from other caregivers who had passed through there. Raphael dismissed the woman with a firm gesture and approached his mother kneeling beside the bed, feeling the weight of his own incompetence in the face of that exposed fragility. "Mother, I'm here. What happened?" Helena looked at him, but her eyes didn't really see him. She saw something else, another time. "She went away and I couldn't do anything." Raphael held the trembling hands. "Who went away, Mother?" Helena stared at him, and for a terrible instant she was completely lucid. "Julia, they sent her away. I begged your grandfather not to do it. She was sick. She needed help. But he said there was no room for weakness in this house. I was too cowardly to face him. And she went away, and she died alone." Raphael felt the world spin. His mother knew. She had always known. And she had carried that guilt for decades. The dementia was exposing truths that Helena had never had the courage to say. "You knew Julia?" Helena nodded, tears streaming down. "She was my friend, the only person in this house who treated me like a human being, and I betrayed her. I stayed silent when I should have screamed." The confession left Raphael stunned. "Marina is her granddaughter." Helena closed her eyes and a sad smile appeared. "I know. I noticed from the first day. She has the same eyes." Raphael felt a lump in his throat. "Why didn't you tell me?" Helena opened her eyes with painful lucidity. "Because I hoped you would find out on your own, that you would see in her what I saw, that you would be different from your grandfather, from all the men in this family who confused power with the right to destroy." The words were an accusation and a challenge. Helena continued, her voice weak. "I loved someone once, not your father. Someone my family considered inadequate. A gardener who worked here. We truly loved each other, but I chose security, the surname. I married your father because it was expected, and I spent my entire life regretting it." Raphael hugged his mother, feeling the fragile body tremble. Helena whispered, "Don't be like me. Don't let fear decide for you. Don't let her go away without a fight." The elderly woman fell asleep shortly after, exhausted. In the following days, Raphael tried to speak with Marina, but she evaded him. She arrived early, went straight to Helena's room, stayed there all day, and left through the back. The 2 weeks' notice were passing too quickly. It was then that he discovered, searching through more archives, a hidden wooden box. Inside were letters, dozens of handwritten letters. They were from Julia to Helena, and from Helena to Julia. A clandestine correspondence maintained over years, revealing a deep friendship. Raphael read everything, feeling fascination and horror. Julia wrote about her life, about the granddaughter she raised alone, about simple dreams. Helena responded with honesty she never demonstrated in public, confessing her unhappiness, her golden loneliness. And then, in the last letters, the change. Julia was sick, she needed help. Helena begged her to accept assistance, promised to talk to the family. But Helena's last letter was never answered, and there was a letter from Julia, never sent, found among her belongings. Raphael read it with a heavy heart. Julia wrote that she understood Helena's difficult position, that she held no grudge, and she ended by asking a favor, that if she ever had the opportunity, Helena would take care of her granddaughter Marina. Raphael closed his eyes. Everything made sense. The way Helena had accepted Marina, the calm she felt in her presence. It wasn't just physical resemblance. It was the chance to honor a promise that had never been kept. On the last day of the notice period, Raphael waited in the hallway. When Marina appeared, he gently blocked the way. "Please, give me 5 minutes." Marina hesitated, but stopped. 5 minutes. Raphael took her to the library. He showed her the letters, explained what he had discovered, told her about Helena's confession, about the friendship with Julia. Marina listened in silence, her face pale, her hands trembling as she held one of her grandmother's letters. "She never told me. I never knew she had a friend here. She always spoke of the Sampaio family with bitterness." Raphael approached. Helena apologized, in the letters, and she told me she betrayed your grandmother, that she was a coward, that she wants to repair this. Marina put the letter back, tears streaming down. "You can't repair it. My grandmother died alone, poor, forgotten." Raphael swallowed hard. "You're right. It doesn't change things. But maybe it explains why my mother grew so attached to you. It's not just professionalism, it's recognition. It's the chance to honor a friendship she didn't know how to defend. Marina stared at him. And you? Why are you showing me this? Raphael took a deep breath. Because I fell in love with you. I know it's wrong. I know we started from impossible places. I know there's a debt between our families. But I fell in love with the way you take care of my mother, with your strength, with the way you made me see that I spent my life being an emotional coward. Marina backed away. That's not love, Raphael, it's idealization. You are projecting onto me everything you think you should be. Raphael took a step forward. I don't want salvation. I want you, with the hurts, with the limitations. I want the chance to prove that I can be different. Marina closed her eyes, and when she opened them, there was sad determination. You don't understand what you're asking. If I stay, if something happens between us, everyone will judge. They will say I'm an opportunist, that I took advantage. They will destroy my reputation. And you will grow tired of defending someone the world insists on seeing as inadequate. Raphael shook his head. And if I don't care? Marina let out a humorless laugh. You say that now, but when the first criticism comes, you will waver, and I can't survive another rejection. She walked toward the door, but Raphael spoke. My mother told me not to be a coward like she was. And you? Are you also going to let fear win? Marina stopped. When she turned, there were tears in her eyes, but also anger. It's not fear. It's survival. It's knowing that people like me can't afford to risk everything for a feeling, because when it goes wrong, you still have your houses, and we are left with nothing. She left. Raphael stood there, surrounded by the books and letters that told stories of lost loves and eternal regrets. And for the first time, he understood that love wasn't about wanting intensely. It was about worthiness. And he still didn't deserve Marina. In the following days, Helena worsened. The new caregiver was competent, but the elderly woman rejected her violently. She screamed, cried, refused food. The doctors suggested hospitalization, but Raphael refused. He called Marina one last time. My mother is worsening. Without you, she is fading away. I know I have no right to ask, but I'm asking anyway. Not for me, for her. Come back, at least until the end. There was a long silence, and then Marina said, I'll come back, but I won't live there. I'll do shifts as a professional. And you need to promise me one thing. Promise that you will use this time to truly understand what reparation means. It's not about you feeling better, it's about doing what is right even when it hurts. Raphael closed his eyes. I promise. Marina returned the next day, and Helena calmed instantly. But now there was a distance between Raphael and Marina. She was cordial, professional, but she had built a wall. And perhaps that was how it should be. Perhaps he first needed to transform himself, confront his legacy, dismantle the structure of privilege. Only then, if Marina still wanted to, could he offer something that wasn't contaminated by the past. Raphael began with the hardest thing, confronting his own reflection in the mirror and admitting what he saw there. A 43-year-old man who had built a brilliant career managing others' fortunes, who had become a reference in the financial market, who had the respect of investors and businessmen, but who had never questioned where the initial capital that had given him an advantage from the start came from. A man who spoke of meritocracy with the confidence of someone who truly believed he had conquered everything alone, when he had been born with all doors open, while people like Marina needed to break down every single one just to have the right to be seen as human, as worthy of respect. He hired a lawyer specialized in labor issues, not to defend himself but to investigate. He wanted names, dates, amounts that should have been paid and weren't. The lawyer looked at him as if he were crazy. Due to Raphael, this could open retroactive lawsuits. Raphael just replied, do the survey, all of it. The following weeks were of nauseating discoveries. 17 employees over 40 years had been fired in similar circumstances. Illness, old age, work accidents, all treated with bureaucratic coldness. Raphael spent sleepless nights calculating not only what would be fair in legal terms, but in human terms. He created a reparation fund. He sold one of the apartments he kept as an investment, liquidated shares, reorganized his own assets. He began to locate the people or their descendants. He didn't send lawyers with cold proposals. He went himself. He took planes, crossed cities, sat in modest living rooms and apologized in the name of a family that had never learned to ask. It wasn't easy. Some received him with suspicion, others with anger. One woman said to his face, "Money doesn't bring my father back." Raphael replied with the only truth he had, "No, it doesn't erase it, but it's all I can offer." Marina knew about all this because Raphael didn't hide it. He left the documents in plain sight, spoke openly. She didn't comment much, just observed, and he felt he was being tested. Would he be able to sustain it when it got difficult? And they confronted him. Distant cousins, uncles, even the family lawyer called in indignation. There were threats of interdiction, suggestions that he was under undue influence, insinuations about Marina. But he did not back down. Meanwhile, Helena continued to wither. The dementia advanced relentlessly, but in moments of lucidity she smiled at Raphael in a new way. Pride, perhaps. One afternoon, Marina and Raphael were both in Helena's room. The elderly woman was asleep. Marina was changing the sheets, and Raphael was helping, learning the small gestures that made up daily care. "You're different," Marina said. Raphael adjusted his mother's head on the pillow. "I'm trying to be." She stared at him, and there was something new. "Why? Is it for me or for you?" Raphael thought. "In the beginning, it was for you, but now it's for me. Because I can no longer live knowing I am part of a system that destroys people." Marina sat down, tired. "You know this will cost you dearly, not just financially, socially too." Raphael looked at his mother. "Let them not forgive. I spent my whole life worrying about approval from people who never deserved my respect." Marina let out a sigh. "You're growing, Raphael." He looked at her, vulnerable. "Do you think there's still time? For me to become someone you can respect?" Marina looked away. "I already respect you, not for what you were, but for what you are trying to become. But respect is not the same thing as what you want from me." Raphael knew that. "I know, and that's okay. If you can never look at me as anything other than the son of the family that destroyed yours, I understand. But I need you to know I'm doing this not to impress you, but because it's right." Helena moved, her eyes opening. "Julia?" Marina held the elderly woman's hand. "No, Donna Helena, it's me, Marina." Helena blinked. "Marina? Yes, so much like her." And then, turning to Raphael, "Are you treating her well?" Raphael felt a lump in his throat. "I'm trying, Mother. I'm trying to be different." Helena smiled, weak but genuine. "Good, because she is special, as Julia was, and I don't want you to make the same mistakes I did." She touched Raphael's face. "Do you know why I married your father? Because I was afraid. Afraid of being poor, of being judged, of losing everything. So I chose security. And I spent 50 years living a lie." She turned to Marina. "Don't let him be a coward like I was. If he isn't capable of choosing you above everything, don't let him pretend it's love." Marina squeezed Helena's hand. "I promise, Donna Helena." That night, Helena had a cardiac arrest. The doctors managed to resuscitate her, but it was delaying the inevitable. Raphael made the hardest decision, not to prolong life artificially. Marina was there when it happened, holding Helena's hand on one side, Raphael on the other. Helena died at dawn on a Sunday, with birds singing and the smell of coffee rising from the kitchen. Marina was humming softly, and Raphael just held his mother's hand, feeling life slip away slowly. When her breathing stopped, Marina said, her voice choked, "She is at peace now." Raphael couldn't answer. He just cried, and for the first time in decades allowed someone to see him completely broken. Marina hugged him. She didn't say empty words, didn't try to minimize the pain. She just held him. The funeral was small as Helena had requested. Few people, simple ceremony. Marina was there not as an employee, but as someone Helena considered important. Some looked with strangeness. Raphael didn't care. After the burial, when everyone had already gone, Raphael and Marina were left alone in the cemetery. She asked me for one thing before she went into a coma. On the last day, she was conscious. Raphael looked at her, curious. Marina hesitated. She told me she loved you, but she never knew how to show it, and that she saw in you the last chance to repair the family's mistakes. She asked me not to give up on you before giving you a real chance." Raphael felt his chest tighten. "And what did you answer?" Marina looked at the sky. "I said I couldn't promise anything, that there was too much pain between our stories, but that I respected you enough not to lie about what I felt." Raphael took a step toward her. "And what do you feel?" Marina finally stared at him, vulnerable for the first time. "I'm afraid that this is too big, too complicated. But I also feel something I didn't want to feel, something that grows every time I see you trying to be better." Raphael held her hands. "I'm not going to lie and say it will be easy. It won't. The world will judge, people will talk. But I promise, if you give me a chance, I will spend every day proving that you were not wrong to trust." Marina closed her eyes, tears falling. "I don't know if I can. I don't know if I'm strong enough." Raphael touched her face. "You are the strongest person I know. But you don't have to face it alone. For the first time in my life, I want to share the weight." Marina opened her eyes and looked at him intensely. "If I say yes, you need to understand I won't be patient. I won't accept half-truths. Either you are completely in, or it's better to end it now." Raphael nodded. "I am completely in." Marina took a deep breath, and then it was she who closed the distance. She kissed Raphael right there in the cemetery, under a sky threatening a storm, beside the tomb of a woman who had spent her life running away from true love. The kiss was salty with tears, heavy with fear, but charged with fragile hope. When they separated, Marina said, "This doesn't mean everything is resolved. We still have a lot to face, but it means I'm willing to try." The rain began to fall, but neither of them moved. They stayed there, embraced, letting the water wash away the last resistances. And when they finally left, hand in hand, Raphael knew the path would be brutal. But for the first time in his life, he wasn't running away. He was going straight toward it with a woman who was worth every challenge. The first weeks after the funeral were a test of fire that neither of them expected to face in such a brutal and relentless way. Raphael knew there would be resistance, that the world around him wouldn't easily accept his choices, but he completely underestimated the calculated cruelty with which the society he had always frequented would react. The news that he was in a serious relationship with his mother's former caregiver spread through São Paulo's social circles like a wildfire in dry brush during the hottest season of the year. It didn't take long for calls to start coming to his cell phone, for poisonous comments to reach his ears through third parties who claimed to be concerned, for insinuations to gain substance in elevator conversations in the commercial buildings of Faria Lima. One of the partners of the investment fund scheduled a lunch. The man, Gustavo, was direct. "Raphael, you need to understand the position you're putting us in. Clients are questioning your judgment." "A caregiver, Raphael?" Raphael drank the wine slowly. "It seems I am in a relationship with an extraordinary woman who dedicated herself to my mother when she needed it most." Gustavo laughed without humor. "Think about reality. People will say she took advantage. This affects our credibility." Raphael put the glass down with controlled force. "Then maybe it's time for me to step away from the company, because I'm not going to choose between Marina and my career." The silence was tense. "Are you serious? You're going to throw away everything we built for a woman you met months ago?" Raphael stood up. "I'm not throwing anything away. I'm choosing what truly matters. And if you can't see the problem in judging someone by their origin, then maybe our values were never aligned." He left without looking back. For Marina, the attacks were even more direct. Colleagues began to look at her differently. A nurse said to her face, "I never imagined you'd be one of those who uses work to hunt for a rich man." Marina swallowed the humiliation in public, but when she got to the apartment, she broke down. Raphael showed up an hour later. He found her sitting on the floor, her eyes red. His first instinct was to hug her, but Marina pushed him away. "No. You can't just show up and fix it with a hug." Raphael sat beside her, keeping his distance. "I know, but I can stay here while you feel it." Marina looked at him, exhausted. "They're right, Raphael. In part. I am the caregiver. You are the rich boss. No matter what we feel, people will always reduce us to those roles." Raphael took a deep breath. Do you want to break up? Marina closed her eyes. I want this to be easier. Raphael extended his hand without touching. Then we carry it together. And every time someone tries to reduce us to stereotypes, we prove we are more than that. Marina looked at that hand for long seconds, and then she held it. Not because she believed it would be easy, but because she decided it was worth trying. In the following months, they built something neither expected, a real relationship. There were fights, misunderstandings, cultural differences that generated friction. Marina didn't know how to navigate Raphael's world, and he didn't fully understand the pressures she faced. When he took her to a dinner with investors, she felt like an imposter, surrounded by women who talked about trips and luxury brands. One of them asked, "And you, Marina, what do you do?" The question was innocent on the surface, but loaded with judgment. "I am a nursing technician. I work with palliative care." The woman arched her eyebrows. "How admirable! It must be challenging." Her tone made it clear what she thought. Raphael placed his hand over Marina's. "Marina took care of my mother in the last months of her life, with a humanity that none of us here could demonstrate. She is the strongest person I know." On the way back, Marina was too quiet. Raphael tried to break the silence. "I'm sorry about that," Marina interrupted him. "They are your world, Raphael, and I will never belong to it." Raphael stopped the car, turned off the engine. "Then we build a new world, one that isn't theirs or mine, but ours." Marina let out a tired laugh. "You think that's how it works?" Raphael held her face. "No, I know it doesn't. But I also know I don't want to spend my life in a world that demands I choose between you and social acceptance. So I choose you." Raphael's extended family found out about the reparation fund. A cousin called a meeting. Raphael attended knowing he would be attacked, and he was. Accusations of irresponsibility, questioning of mental sanity, insinuations that Marina was manipulating him. Raphael listened in silence, and when they finished, he said only, "You're right, I am destroying the family that existed, the one that thought it was normal to discard people, and I will continue destroying it until only what is worthwhile remains." There were threats of lawsuits, of social exclusion. Raphael did not back down. When Marina found out, she hugged him and cried, not out of sadness, but out of frightened relief. "You're really doing this?" Raphael held her tightly. "It's not hard. It's the only easy thing I've done in my life." But the pressure took its toll. Marina began to have insomnia, anxiety attacks. Raphael accompanied her to a psychologist. She spoke openly about the trauma of losing her grandmother, about the guilt, about the fear of repeating patterns. The therapist asked Raphael if he understood what it meant to be with someone who carried that kind of wound. "It means she will have days when she won't be able to trust you. Are you prepared?" Raphael answered without hesitation, "I am, because I also have my wounds, and she is teaching me that I don't need to be ashamed of them." It was during this time that Raphael made the most radical decision. He sold the house in Jardim Europa, that house loaded with bad memories of luxury built upon injustice. He used part of the money to increase the reparation fund, and the rest to buy a simple apartment in a middle-class neighborhood. Marina went with him to see the apartment before the purchase. "Are you sure? It's a drastic change." Raphael hugged her from behind. "The old house was a tomb. This here can be a home, if you want to build it with me." Marina turned in his arms. "I want to, but on one condition. You don't do this just for me. You do it because it's who you want to be. Because if one day you regret it and blame me, I won't survive." Raphael kissed her. "I'm doing it for myself, because I discovered I can't live being the person I was." They moved 3 months later. There was no luxury moving company. They themselves carried the boxes, assembled the furniture, and argued about where to put everything. And at the end of the day, exhausted, they sat on the floor of the empty living room, eating pizza straight from the box. Marina rested her head on his shoulder. "Do you know what's strange? I spent so much time afraid you'd go back to the world you came from. But I think you never really belonged to that world." Raphael kissed the top of her head. "Thank you for showing me that another place existed." Marina pulled away to look him in the eyes. You deserved it, yes, you just didn't know, but now you do. They made love right there on the hard floor, without movie romanticism, but with an intimacy that no luxurious setting could provide. And afterward, lying in each other's arms, Raphael said for the first time, I love you not because you saved me, but because you challenged me to save myself. Marina smiled, tears streaming down. I love you too, and I'm afraid every day, but I choose you anyway. It was in that moment that Raphael understood that true love wasn't the absence of fear, but the courage to continue despite it. And for the first time since they met, both slept without nightmares, only with the fragile but real certainty that they were in the right place. A year later, Raphael was sitting on the balcony of the apartment, drinking coffee as the morning sun warmed his face. Marina was in the kitchen preparing breakfast, and he heard the sound of her humming softly, an old song she had learned from her grandmother. These simple moments, which before would have seemed tedious to him, were now the most precious. The phone rang. It was the lawyer for the reparation fund. 3 more families had been located. Raphael noted the details, thanked him, and hung up. Marina appeared with a tray. She sat beside him, and Raphael thought about how happiness could be silent. More families? Marina asked. Raphael nodded. 3 more. I'm going to visit them next week. Marina touched his hand. Do you want me to go along? Raphael looked at her, grateful. You would do that. She smiled. I've done it before, and I think it's important. Maybe I can help explain it in a way they understand better. After all, I came from the same place. Raphael intertwined his fingers with hers. In the last months, Marina had become an active part of the reparation process. She talked to the families with an empathy he could never have. Together, they formed an unlikely but effective team, and Raphael realized that this was healing something in her too. Raphael's work had also changed. He had left the investment fund and started acting as an independent consultant, choosing whom he worked with based on values. He lost clients, of course, but he gained something money never bought: peace of conscience. Marina continued working as a caregiver, but now she also gave lectures on palliative care, on the importance of treating the elderly with dignity. She had become a respected voice in the field. One night, Raphael arrived home and found Marina sitting on the sofa, looking at the box with the letters from Julia and Helena. Are you okay? She had tears in her eyes, but she was smiling. I was rereading the letters. My grandmother wrote here that her greatest sadness wasn't poverty, nor illness. It was the regret of not having fought for what she believed in. Raphael waited. Marina continued. She died with that regret. But look at us, Raphael. We are fighting. Not silent, not conformed. We are making noise, causing discomfort. And I think that honors her memory more than any compensation. Raphael hugged her. Your grandmother would be proud of you. Marina sobbed against his chest. I wanted so much for her to be able to meet you, the true version of you. Raphael kissed her hair. She does. In some way, wherever she is, she knows. The following months brought unexpected changes. Raphael received an invitation to give a lecture at a public university on business ethics. Raphael accepted, nervous. On the day of the lecture, the auditorium was full. Marina was in the front row. Raphael began by telling the raw truth, how he had grown up in privilege without questioning where it came from, how he had perpetuated injustices by omission, how he had only woken up when confronted by someone who had reasons to hate him but chose something different. He spoke about Julia, about Helena, about the cowardice of a family that preferred comfort over humanity. And then he spoke about Marina, not as his girlfriend, but as the woman who had the moral courage to work in a house that represented the worst of her history, and yet cared for an elderly woman with tenderness. When he finished, there was a dense silence, and then intense applause. Several students asked questions, and Raphael answered with brutal honesty. He admitted he still struggled against internalized privileges, that he still made mistakes, that the process was daily and painful, but that it was worth it. After the lecture, a young woman approached. Dr. Raphael, my mother worked her whole life as a domestic worker for rich families. She was treated as invisible. Hearing someone from your side recognize that publicly means more than you imagine." Raphael felt a lump in his throat. "Thank your mother for all the dignity she maintained, and tell her there are people trying to do things differently." Marina was waiting outside, and when she saw him, she smiled in a way that lit up her whole face. "You were incredible." Raphael kissed her right there. "I would be nothing without you." Marina held his face. "You would be, yes, but maybe it would take longer to discover." 6 months later, Raphael woke up with Marina already on her feet on the balcony watching the dawn. He got up and went to her, hugging her from behind. "Couldn't sleep." Marina leaned her head against his chest. "I was thinking about my grandmother, about your mother, about everything that happened for us to get here." Raphael turned her to face him. "Do you regret anything? The losses, the fights, the money you could have kept?" Raphael did not hesitate. "Nothing. I would trade it all again, 1,000 times." It was then that he took a small box from his pocket. Marina's eyes widened. "Raphael." He knelt right there on the balcony. "Marina dos Santos, I'm not going to lie saying it will be easy. There will be people who will always judge us. But I want to spend the rest of my life proving them wrong. I want to wake up every day choosing you. I want to build a family that is the opposite of everything mine was. Will you marry me?" Marina was crying but smiling. She pulled Raphael up. "You're very dramatic, you know." He laughed nervously. "Is that a yes?" Marina kissed him deeply. "It's a yes, but on conditions. We don't do a rich wedding with ostentation. We do something simple, true." Raphael spun her in the air. "Whatever you want, as long as at the end of the day you are my wife." The wedding took place 3 months later, at a small ranch in the countryside. There was no list based on social status, only people who were truly part of their lives. Marina's colleagues, former patients, some of Raphael's clients who became true friends, families who had received reparation. There was no famous band, no magazine decoration, no designer dress. Marina wore a simple dress she chose herself. Raphael was in a suit but without a tie. The ceremony was conducted by a friend, without excessive pomp. When it came time for the vows, Raphael held Marina's hands. "I promise never to forget where we came from. I promise to honor the memory of 2 women who showed us that love is courage. I promise that when I fail, and I will fail, I will admit it and do differently. I promise to build with you a legacy that isn't of money but of dignity. And I promise that every morning when I wake up, I will choose you again." Marina squeezed his hands. "I promise to remind you who you are on the days you forget. I promise not to let you go back to being who you were, but also not to let you lose yourself trying to be perfect. I promise to share the weight of the struggles, the pains, the victories. And I promise to honor the women who came before us, doing what they couldn't, choosing love over fear." There were no fireworks, no party until dawn. But there was dancing, laughter, and sincere hugs. When the night ended, Raphael and Marina were left alone on the ranch balcony looking at the stars. "Do you think they are watching?" Marina asked. Raphael pulled her closer. "I'm sure, and I think they're proud." Marina turned in his arms. "What are we going to do now?" Raphael thought. We continue the reparation work. We continue living in a way that honors what we believe. And maybe, if you want, we build a family." Marina smiled. "I want to. I want all of that. I want to build with you something that heals the wounds we inherited. I want our children to grow up knowing that dignity matters more than a surname." Raphael kissed her, and in that kiss there was promise, hope, and the certainty that despite everything they had won. 2 years later, Marina gave birth to a girl. They named her Julia Helena, honoring the 2 women whose frustrated love had, in a crooked way, created the path for them to find each other. Raphael held his daughter in his arms, marveling. "She won't carry our mistakes. She won't inherit guilt or emotional debts. She will grow up knowing that love is a conscious choice." Marina, exhausted but radiant, smiled. She will grow up knowing she comes from 2 lineages, one of misused power, another of silent resistance, and that her challenge is to honor what was good in both and correct what was bad. Raphael lay down beside them. We will fail with her. We won't be perfect parents. Won't. Marina laughed softly. I know, but we will be present parents, and when she confronts us one day, we will have the courage to listen, to admit failures, to do differently. Raphael kissed Marina's forehead, then the baby's little head. Thank you. For everything. For not having given up on me. For having shown me that I could be better. Marina held his hand. Thank you. For having the courage to dismantle everything you knew and start over. For having proven that change is possible. They stayed like that, the three of them, as the afternoon sun came through the window. And Raphael realized he finally understood what his mother had tried to say. Love wasn't about having everything resolved. It wasn't about ease. It was about looking at another person, with all their imperfections, and deciding, you. Every day, in every choice, small and large, you. Marina fell asleep with the daughter on her chest. Raphael stayed awake, watching the two of them, feeling a gratitude that hurt. He thought about everything he had needed to lose to gain that. The status, the social approval, the contaminated inheritance. And he didn't regret anything. Because there, in that simple hospital room, with a woman who had come from the other side of inequality, and a daughter who would carry the name of two women who loved but could not fully live that love, he had everything that mattered. He had presence, he had truth, he had love won through real transformation, and he had the certainty that for the first time in generations, the Sampaio family would be building something that did not sustain itself upon the misery of others. Little Julia Helena moved, and Raphael delicately touched her tiny closed hand. The baby grabbed his finger with surprising strength, and in that simple gesture, Raphael saw the future. A future where this child would grow up knowing she came from opposite places that met by choice, that she would inherit not immoral wealth, but values that could transform the world. When Marina woke up hours later, she found Raphael still there, watching the two of them with tenderness. What were you thinking about? Raphael kissed her hand. I was thinking that we won, not because everything is perfect, but because we chose to continue, day after day, even when it seemed impossible. She pulled him closer, and the three of them stayed there, an unlikely but solid unit, built upon the ruins of old injustices and the courage to do differently. Outside, the world would continue judging, trying to reduce them to stereotypes. But inside, they had something no one could